Hi folks, this is Craig from Craig's History Channel. I'm trying something a little bit different today. I'm actually blessed enough to be able to talk from the inside of an air-conditioned rental car. It's a 2022 Toyota Camry, and anyway, it feels pretty good in here. Anyway, so basically today I'm going to talk about my brushes with history, and this is just a part one of a series. In 1965, I got to watch Bill Suter fly a Bell rocket belt. That was pretty cool. When I was a kid, I used to live in the Dayton, Ohio area, and my father found out that a guy by the name of Bill Suter was going to be demonstrating a Bell rocket belt at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Museum over in Fairborn, which is a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. And I might be wrong about the name of the pilot. It could have been Harold Graham, but I believe it was actually Bill Suter. Anyway, in case you don't know what a rocket belt is, it's basically a backpack with cylinders on the back of it and rocket nozzles, and it works off of hydrogen peroxide. And there's a precious metal catalyst inside a combustion chamber and stuff like that. And I've included a diagram that shows how it works. Um, the pilot had to wear a special suit to protect him from getting burnt. Uh, the steam coming out of the nozzles was about 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, and so that's the reason he had to wear the special suit. Um, so anyway, so I got to see the pilot fly the rocket belt, and let me tell you something. It was very shrill and very loud, and I had to cover my ears. And I was very young at the time, and it was just something that stuck with me. That sound is just something you don't forget. Um, and I got to see him fly it. And of course, you can't fly it very high. Only about 9 meters high, maybe 120 feet distance, for about 21 seconds. Later on in the 1990s, they improved the rocket belts so that they could fly, about the distance of a football field, and stay up for about 30 seconds. And not to get political, but in 1971, I got to see President Richard Nixon dedicate a Air Force museum in Fairborn, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton, Ohio. The original Air Force Museum at Fairborn, Ohio, had outgrown its exhibit space. So towards the end of the 60s, they had to create a bigger museum across the base, um, and they had to make one of the museum buildings big enough to hold a B-36 Peacemaker bomber. Um, and so what they had to do was create the hangar and then back the B-36 bomber into the hangar before they put the end of the hangar on. And then after they got the plane in there, um, they put the end wall of the hangar on, and then they hung the hangar doors. Uh, So they had to basically build the museum around the B-36 bomber. Um, and that particular airplane, from a distance, when you're looking straight at it, it's got so much glass on the front of it that it looks like you're looking at a globe of the world. And on September the 3rd, 1971, my father took me there to the museum to see President Richard Nixon dedicate the museum. And he was standing on a podium in front of the cockpit of the bomber. And it just looked like he was standing in front of a globe of the world. It was a really neat thing to see. I was uh, on my father's shoulders about, oh, maybe 200 feet in front of the president, maybe more. Uh, and anyway, he looked very small from that distance. Um, and of course, the Vietnam War was going on at that particular time. And
So it seems as though, because of all the protesters around, that they tried to protect the president by putting him in a different limousine than what we expected him to be in. Um, and he was sitting back in the back seat. He was actually sitting really, as flat as he could against the back seat. But I saw his silhouette and I saw his nose sticking forward. But then, anyway, some of us started to wave at this one particular limousine that he was in, and I guess he noticed that people saw him, so he waved back at us. And the picture that you see here is not the actual picture of him waving at us. That's a picture I got off the internet and of him waving at some other people. Um, and I provided a picture of a plaque that you can find at the museum that memorializes that particular day. Also, there is a picture of uh, what the museum looked like on that particular day when it was dedicated. Um, since then, it's been added onto a couple more times, and it's a really neat place to go see. And if you ever are up in Ohio in the Dayton area, you got to look it up. It's over in a suburb called Fairborn, and it's really worth seeing. And you could spend a lot of hours there. They have a nice gift shop. As far as I know, the restaurant's still open there. But anyway, um, I think that you'll will really like it. I've been there many times.
In 1976, I got to live in the famous Sorg Mansion of Middletown, Ohio.
In the fall of 1976, I got to live in the famous Sorg Mansion of Middletown, Ohio. It was built in 1887 for a man that owned a tobacco business, and his name was Paul John Sorg. Uh, Later on, he sold his tobacco business and he bought a, paper mill and started making a paper product. Um, and then he became a congressman of the state of Ohio, and he had a personal secretary by the name of James Cox. Um, and In 1902, Paul Sorg passed away, and then James Cox became a congressman for the state of Ohio. And then, of course, James Cox also owned a newspaper in Dayton, Ohio. Um, and after James Cox got done being a congressman, he got elected as governor of the state of Ohio. After he got done being the governor of the state of Ohio, um, he made his newspaper company grow, and he got into other forms of media like radio and TV. Um, and the company still exists, and it's called Cox Media Group. And after Mr. Sorg passed away in 1902, um, his widow made sure that the mansion got some additions done to the front of it. And these additions were a couple of round towers, as you can see in this photograph. After Mrs. Sorg passed away, a realtor by the name of Harry Finkelman um, bought the mansion and turned it into a bunch of low-cost efficiency apartments and sleeping rooms. And in 1976, my father used to live in one of those sleeping rooms. And then later on, uh, my mom and I moved into the mansion, and then my parents were asked to become managers of the mansion, which meant that they would collect rent and distribute the mail and call, certain repairmen if something needed to be fixed and that sort of thing. Uh, we lived there for only 3 months, and then we moved someplace else. And this is what the mansion looked like when I lived there um, in 1976. The first room that I slept in was the library room, which is the room there on the bottom. Um, it has the stained glass windows there on the first floor inside that round room. And that was a really neat room to stay in. And this is what the gargoyle looks like that's up on one of the roof peaks. You'll see this on the north side of the mansion. There's probably about 3 or 4 of these figures carved into the pillars on the front porch. Different places around the exterior of the mansion, you'll see the faces of cherubs like this carved into the stonework. I don't know where this face is carved on the outside of the mansion, but the face kind of reminds me of Paul Sorg. This is a photograph of a birthday party for some children, um, and the photo was taken outside of the library room, which at one time was my bedroom. This is a photograph taken inside the first floor main hallway. Um, the first open door that you see would be the library room where I used to sleep. There's a nice fireplace in there. I'll show you pictures of the fireplace later. The second door on the right would be the dining room, which I had never been in. And this is a photograph of what the library room looked like when I slept there. There's several faces carved into the woodwork. There's one big face carved into the woodwork above the fireplace, up above the mirror right there. You can't see it in the other photograph, but this is a photograph of a face made out of mosaic tile that is in an area up above the firebox of the fireplace. This is a photograph of a Facebook page that I run concerning the Sorg Mansion of Middletown, Ohio. And you're welcome to take a look at that page. The mansion was bought a few years ago by a nice married couple, and they have totally restored the mansion and they use it as their private residence. If you do a Google search for the Sorg Mansion of Middletown, Ohio, you will find sometimes where they offer tours of the mansion. So make sure that you look for those advertisements on the internet. And only on those particular days and times you should walk past the gates and up to the front door. Otherwise, you would be trespassing.
And also, I survived the blizzard of 1978 in Ohio.
In January of 1978, I was in a little town called Leesburg, Ohio, and a the famous blizzard of 1978 came through. And this is a photograph that's been circulating on the internet for quite some time now that shows what it was like. Um, and there was snow that was piled way up high on top of the cars, and you had a hard time even trying to find your car. Um, there was times where snow plows would push snow up against your car and over your car, and also there was so much snowfall that it just covered everything up. And by the way, I run a Facebook page about Leesburg, Ohio, um, and you can check it out if you would like. And I used to live in a old house that's marked with a red X on this map shown here. And when the blizzard came through, it sucked the glass out of a windowsill in back of my bed, and then a curtain was just flapping in the breeze. Um, so I had to move out of the bedroom and, uh, sit in a uh, lounge chair in the living room in front of the fireplace along with my mom and the dog. And then the next morning, we went over to the Methodist parsonage next door into their basement there and kept warm in front of their fireplace, along with the pastor's family and the funeral director and his family. And we used a fireplace that was similar to this one for heating and cooking and for melting snow to make water. And this is a drawing showing the separate sleeping bags that we slept in on the floor of the basement in the Methodist church parsonage. I'm sure that there was a lot of people that went through a lot of hardship during the blizzard, but we did pretty good down there in the basement. We didn't have any problems, and I really enjoyed the camaraderie of being around those other people, and they kind of became extended family for us, it seemed. Here is a written description of what the blizzard was like, so take your time and read through it.
Also in 1978, I got to meet and talk with Martin Luther King Sr., which is the father of Martin Luther King Jr., of course.
In December of 1978, my parents and my brother and me were down in Atlanta, Georgia, and we was looking at Martin Luther King Jr.'s mausoleum, which was in the middle of a fountain. It still is there, by the way. Um, and my father looked down the sidewalk and thought that he saw Martin Luther King Sr. Standing on the front step of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. And so he uh, motioned for us to come on down. And so, my mom and my brother and we walked on down to where my father was standing, and then we all walked further down to meet Martin Luther King um, Sr. And so we all talked to him for about 5 minutes, I guess, and it was a really nice little discussion we had. And it was a pleasure to meet Martin Luther King Jr.'s father. Um, he passed away a couple.
And also, not to get political, but in 1978, I also got to see President Jimmy Carter in Plains, Georgia.
So in December of 1978, uh, we arrived in Plains, Georgia, right around dark time, and we happened to notice that there was a motorcade starting up outside of President Jimmy Carter's house. And so we followed the motorcade, and it arrived downtown there in Plains, Georgia. And then Jimmy Carter got out of the limousine along with his wife and a little girl. It could have been Amy Carter. Um, I'm not so sure. But anyway, so he got out and greeted different people. Got to shake his hand, and then he also greeted different store owners of the stores downtown. And some of those stores had a little wooden sidewalk out front, kind of like a western town, and which I thought was very quaint. And so anyway, so I got to see him, and I don't want to get political uh, on this site, and I'm not going to give my opinions about anybody. I don't care what party they're from, but I'm just telling you, about my different brushes of history. And so, anyway, so God bless him and all of our presidents. Um, anyway, so that was very nice, and I was glad to be able to meet him.
And in 1978, I got to visit my great great grandfather's Civil War grave down in Georgia.
So, also in December of 1978, I got to stop by the Andersonville National Cemetery down in Macon County, Georgia, and I got to visit the tomb of my great great grandfather, Jenkins Davis. And Jenkins Davis was born in Wales many, many, many years ago, and then he moved from Wales and he came to America, and then he somehow got caught up in the Civil War. Um, he was working on the Union side, and he got caught in Rogersville, Tennessee, back in November the 6th of 1863. That's where he got captured. And then he died in the Andersonville prison camp in, let's see, June the 9th of 1864. He was only 43 years old, and He died of dysentery. The number that you see on the top of his gravestone is just a identification number.
In the spring of 1979, I got to work for the semi-famous photographer by the name of Jerry Shoemaker.
You have probably seen some photographs like this of FDR in the back of a car with his hat tipped. A very small percentage of those photographs were shot by a photographer by the name of Jerry Shoemaker. And in the spring of 1979, he hired me to write some names under some pictures of seniors for a photo collage that goes in the hallway of a high school. And I did a couple of those for him. He was very old at the time, and I think 1979 was the last year that he did any photography for any of the local schools.
Well, folks, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Anyway, I ask you to do me a favor. If you like these videos, would you please give them a thumbs up? And also hit the subscribe button. And also hit the notification bell, especially the black notification bell, so that you'll be notified about all my new videos when they come out. And also ask that you share my videos. And also leave a comment, because I would love to hear from you folks, okay? All right. Well, you guys take care, and I'll talk to you next time. And also, not to get political, but in 1978, I got to see... unlike my Circle water bottle from Walmart.